The meeting is now started.
Thank you. Good evening, all.
Good evening. Good evening. Evening.
I declare the meeting of the City Council open. This meeting is being conducted remotely in accordance with the coronavirus regulations and remote meetings protocol agreed by the Cabinet, which will operate alongside the Council's standing orders to ensure that we will continue to take democratic decisions in an open and transparent manner. I would remind members that this meeting is being live streamed to the public. Can I request that you all switch off your cameras and mute your microphones when you are not speaking to ensure there's an unnecessary background noise and help with the audio and visual quality of the broadcast.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, your mic's off.
Sorry, I'll start again. Sorry. One of those notes, eh? Right, I'll start again. I declare the meeting of the City Council open. This meeting is being conducted remotely in accordance with the coronavirus regulations and remote meetings protocol agreed by the Cabinet, which will operate alongside the Council's standing orders to ensure that we continue to take democratic decisions in an open and transparent manner. I would remind members that this meeting is being live streamed to the public. Can I request you all switch off your cameras and mute your microphones when you are not speaking to ensure there's no unnecessary background noise and help with the audio and visual quality of the broadcast. The Council's standing orders and code of conduct will apply at all times during this virtual meeting in the same way as ordinary meetings, and members should conduct themselves accordingly. May I also remind members to ensure their chat function is switched on and to use the facility to indicate to me when they wish to speak on a particular item. Please do not speak until I invite you to do so, and remember to unmute your microphone and switch on your camera. For the benefit of everyone watching on the live stream, when I invite members to cast their votes on any particular item, they will all do also electronically by using the voting facility in the chat function. The votes will be automatically counted and recorded on the system, but individual votes are not identified on the screen, and the chat room poll is not available on the live stream for public viewing. However, I will announce the numbers of votes cast for against and any abstentions before I declare the results. As well as being broadcast live, a recorded version of this remote meeting will be uploaded onto the Council website for the public viewing as soon as possible after the meeting. Welsh translation of proceedings can be provided upon request. The images and sound recording may also be used for training purposes within the Council. Item 1. I received no apologies for absence from the following. No apologies. Nobody's absent. If there are any other apologies, they need to be recorded. Then please write those names in the chat box, and it will be recorded in the minutes. 1. Part 2. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest at this stage? Notice board. These councillors who are Newport Transport Board members may wish to declare an interest on item 11 at this stage. If not, they will need to declare and leave the meeting later when they get to this item. If there any declarations of interest arise during the course of the meeting, then members should draw this attention to me by using the hand raise facility or posting a message in the chat box. Okay. Number 1, part 3, announcements. Before I commence with the announcements, I could ask you to join me in observing a minute silence for a period of reflection to remember Councillor Noel Trigg, a former mayor for the year of 2008 to 2009. Also, Adam Cox was a long-standing member in the Cowley ward. Noel Jackson, whose funeral took place on November the 21st. I would like to minute silence. Thank you, everybody. I would like to also take the opportunity to congratulate Matthew Evans on the award of his MBE. Finally, I would like to mention the Remembrance Day and Merchant Navy Day commemoration that I attended. Unfortunately, we are unable to have any usual parade and public services due to the COVID restrictions and need for social distancing. But it was important that we still remembered and recognized the sacrifice made by so many people. I was pleased to be able to participate in these smaller events. Together with local dignitaries and representatives of the RRPL and Merchant Navy Association, I'll lay a wreath at the cenotaph on behalf of the Council. My sincere thanks to all concerned for organising and participating in these commemorations. The minutes from the 29th September 2020 are before us. Are there any points of accuracy? Then I move the minutes as a true record. Is there a seconder?
Second.
Thank you. Thank you. Would all those in favour please indicate by clicking on the voting application in the chat box. I will give all members a short time to cast their vote.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, the voting app is not working for us.
Oh, I'm glad it's not. Well, I'm not glad it's not, but I thought it was me again.
Well, I'll make a decision then.
Unless any member
Yeah.
votes against, Mr. Mayor, I would just take that as read.
Okay. Yes, the approval of the minutes is duly carried. Okay. Appointments. Councillor Harvey to introduce this item. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The appointments are all in the meetings with the addition of Bev Perkins to Maysglass Primary, Councillor Gail Giles, Caroline Lachlan and Mr Paul Huntley at Killian Lodge Hill Primary and Councillor Micdad Arnawami at Tredegar Park Primary. I was asked to announce dispensation, but I will need to double check with your business manager if he wishes me to continue with that.
Okay, Gareth.
That's fine, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Would all councillors please cast their votes by now clicking on the appropriate box in the chat function. I would give all members.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, the voting app isn't working. So again, as with last time, almost by default, if any member wishes to vote against, could they indicate? But otherwise, we will assume that members are in favour of the appointments.
Okay, therefore the appointments are duly carried.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Harvey. Right.
John, your camera's on.
Right. Item 4, police issues. I'm pleased to welcome Superintendent Mike Richards to the meeting. May I remind members that if they wish to put any questions to Superintendent Richards after his presentation, then please use the raise hand facility in the chair box, and I will invite you to speak in the order indicated. Thank you. Superintendent Richards.
Mr. Mayor, Superintendent Richards hasn't been able to join.
Okay, right. We'll go on to item 5. Item 5. Notice a motion to reduce the impact of fireworks in support of RSPCA. The Cabinet Member for Licensing and Regulations, Councillor Councillor Truman is going to introduce the item and formally move the motion. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, fireworks are used by people throughout the year to mark different events. While they can bring much enjoyment to some people, they can cause significant problems and fear for other people and animals. They can be a source of fear and distress for many animals, including pet animals, farm livestock and wildlife. Animals affected not only suffer psychological distress, but can also cause themselves injuries, sometimes very serious ones, as they attempt to run away or hide from the noise. Mr. Mayor, the unpredictable, loud and high-intensive noises that many fireworks make can cause fear. For example, studies have found fireworks to be the most common cause for fear responses in dogs, and it is estimated that 45% of dogs show signs of fear when they hear fireworks. A New Zealand survey recorded 79% of horses as either anxious or very anxious around fireworks or over the Guy Fawkes Day period. It is also likely that fireworks and their debris will cause disturbance to wildlife and are likely to cause suffering or distress depending on the distance from the explosive and noise level. The short-lived nature of firework noise can make it difficult for the police and local authority officers to pinpoint locations and take action. The RSPCA believes that a licensing system would help with better enforcement of the law by allowing enforcement bodies to know where licensed events are being held, so they can focus on locations and incidents elsewhere. Mr. Mayor, the RSPCA Cymru also believes there's a real need to raise awareness amongst owners of animals about fireworks phobia. This phobia can be treated, in dogs at least, in the long term, but owners need to prepare themselves and their pets sooner rather than just before the fireworks are let off. There is a need to raise awareness about the impact of fireworks on animals to the wider public, to encourage them to be more considerate of those with pets, horses and livestock, as well as local wildlife. RSPCA Cymru believes the law is failing as it does not prevent or sufficiently reduce the risk of fireworks causing distress, injury or anxiety to people, as well as death, injury or distress to animals. They believe that further research is needed to properly understand the impact of noise on animals, and a number of things can be done to improve this situation for animals and people. For example, introducing a limit on the public use of fireworks on or close to specific dates and times, tightening restrictions on the sale of fireworks in the run-up to bonfire night, reducing the maximum noise level of fireworks sold to the public, ensuring they are labelled correctly, licensing all public firework displays and ensuring displays are better advertised to the public. Mr. Mayor, the motion before Council supports the RSPCA in lobbying Welsh Government to tighten up the law on the sale and use of fireworks, and commits the Council to actively promoting a public awareness campaign about the impact of fireworks on animal welfare and vulnerable people, including the precautions that can be taken to mitigate risk. Mr. Mayor, I so move the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Truman. Councillor Harvey, do you second the motion?
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor, I second the motion.
Will you speak to the motion now or later in the debate?
I'll speak to it now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's not only pets that suffer when people let off fireworks, it also has a very dramatic effect on our servicemen and women. That explosion puts them right back into a place of hell. PTSD is an awful thing to live with, not only on the person that suffers from PTSD, but their families, their wives, their husbands, their children. These fireworks that are being sold on the streets, sometimes illegally, are just exploding. It's not like a firework as I remember a firework when I was younger. I don't believe they should be sold in shops any longer. The animal welfare is on another level with them. You see the most mild-mannered animal going absolutely berserk because he is so frightened of these noises. Something needs to be done to curtail this, but it's not just for the animals, Mr. Mayor, it's also for our residents that live in our city. I second the motion, and I would very much welcome it being moved forward. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Does any member wish to propose an amendment? Take that as no. Are there any comments on the motion?
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Matthew Evans would like to speak.
Councillor Matthew Evans, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Conservative Group will be supporting this motion, and this year it has been particularly noticeable with a huge increase in private displays and an increasing number of complaints from concerned residents in relation to the stress it causes cats, dogs and other animals. As a dog owner, I'm well aware of the anxiety they can cause and the need to be mindful of the effect of the vulnerable in society, as Councillor Harvey has just mentioned. But we don't want to appear to be killjoys and recognise the enjoyment they bring to many families. I'm sure, to be fair, most are unaware of the unintended consequences, and we all need to be tolerant and learn to expect fireworks at certain times of the year. But we do have a number of questions. We want to encourage public firework displays, so please inform us the estimated cost of advertising, for instance, they would have to undertake, bearing in mind many raise money for charities at these events. If it cost becomes prohibitive, it might well defeat the object. What levers do Welsh Government have at their disposal? Could you be more specific? And finally, how are you going to encourage local suppliers to stock quieter fireworks? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Are there any comments on? No. Councillor Truman, you got the right to reply.
No,
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, there's no facility for me to raise my hand.
Sorry.
No, if Councillor Routley could actually type in the chat room that he would like to speak, then he'll be added to the list. Mr. Mayor, Councillor Forsey is indicated after Matthew Evans.
Mr. Mayor, my typing facility here is not allowing me to do it. So when you're ready, if you call me. When everyone's finished.
We'll make a note of that, Mr. Mayor, and we'll prompt you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much indeed.
Okay, Councillor Forsey, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I strongly welcome this motion because I think we are seeing an increase in nuisance and distress from fireworks nearly every year, and we're getting an increasing number of residents contacting us about the distress that fireworks cause. Just doing quite a small amount of research from good sources on the internet, we can see that about 500 children every year will remember firework night for all the wrong reasons. This is because they've been injured as a result of an accident with fireworks. The majority of injuries are to eyes, head and hands, so children will have visible scars for all of their life. Most of these injuries happen at private or family displays. Over 550 children are taken to A&E in the 4 weeks surrounding firework night, and this is information that I gathered from reading the Children's Burns Trust. In the year 2018-2019, 2,000 people went to A&E with firework injuries. Northern Ireland have a system where you have to have a licence in order to buy fireworks, and I think we need a similar system of regulation here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Forsey.
So, Councillor Lacey, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Laura Lacey, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just would like to add my full support on this motion. This year, more than any years before, in my ward, fireworks became weaponised and were being fired at people's houses, were being actually fired at police vans by youths who were buying them, not just on bonfire night, but it almost became bonfire month. I have a number of residents in my ward who, as Councillor Harvey alluded to, suffer with PTSD. It was horrendous. You know, there were some really vulnerable people who were absolutely petrified for probably about 3 weeks On top of that, I have residents complaining about the dogs and the cats that were, that were scared. It's really, it's no fun. It was awful down there for my residents. So I would absolutely fully support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lacey.
Councillor Cochrane, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Paul Cochrane, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I've got a sort of certainly a vested interest in all the animals I've got. I got 20 sheep, 2 horses, 4 chickens, 2 ducks, a dog, a cat, and 11 goldfish. Now, I don't think the goldfish are being affected by this, but what annoys me, and I think it was what Laura Lacey was saying just now, actually, it's not as if it's just a one-nighter, is it? It went on from Thursday, it went on Friday, it went on Saturday, and it went on Sunday, and this is in people's gardens and all that. Now, if it's going to be a display, I think maybe we can accept it on one night, but when it goes on for 4 and 5 nights, it's totally unacceptable. Totally agree with the motion. We got to start looking about what it's about, and the noise of the fireworks. They're not like they were years ago, to be perfectly honest. Actually, you've got to wear ear defenders now for some of them. So totally support the motion, and I think let's have some sort of support for sort of these dumb animals that can't speak for themselves. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Cochrane. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Al-Nuami is next on the list, but we'll make a note of Councillor Dudley's indication to speak.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Al-Nuami.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just really am asking for clarification. I've got no issue with not supporting the motion. I understand fully the reasons why we are actually debating it tonight. I live in an area where, yes, bonfire night, Halloween bonfire night seem to go for about a week or 2. But it's a question of clarification. It gives, that kind of period give people and families a lot of joy as well. I mean, we don't wish to be killjoys here in terms of sort of having it totally outlawed or, so what I wanted to ask really, when we say public events, what sort of size are we thinking about? Because not this year so much, but other years, of course, families sometimes have little parties around the bonfire night. And they do derive pleasure from it. So we're not thinking about those, are we? Where is the threshold when we say about public fireworks need to advertise so that people can take precautions? It's a question of balance. Yes, I have full sympathy with the animals, to be honest with you. I had a cat. She's resting in peace now, but she used to be frightened, and we used to keep her in around those times. But families also derive some pleasure from fireworks, and we don't wish to prevent them having that. So perhaps the mover and the seconder, when they reply, is clarify what they mean. What size are we talking about where we want these kind of provisions to apply? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Al-Nuami. Thank you.
Councillor Whitcott, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Whitcott, please.
Mr. Mayor, it is a message on the chat for Councillor Whitcott. Could you drop him down the list a bit, please?
Okay, yeah, certainly. Next, please.
Councillor Ferris.
Councillor Charles Ferris, please.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I did ask licensing if there was a point where the fireworks that are being let off would then start to constitute what needs to be a licensing activity. Following on from what Councillor Cochrane observed, of course, the fireworks nowadays are a bit different to the tuppenny bangers and Jackie jumpers that we used to know. Some of them are like hand grenades, and I understand reading from the literature from the RSPCA, the decibel rating from some of these fireworks is equivalent to that of a jet engine taking off. Now, with everything else that the public buys, they've got the ingredients on the can. It says what it does on the can. Surely the same thing should be with the fireworks. It should give a decibel rating. That's not to say that they can't use them, but at least it allows the public to make a more informed choice of the type of firework they are buying, and perhaps we can have a two-tier system, a firework with a sort of level of potency or level of bang that would need to be bought by a licensed and proper person, and then maybe a calmer, prettier firework that could be bought by the public in general. I just put that in, and I would be supporting the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Ferris.
Councillor Routley was the next to indicate, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Routley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a great opportunity for animals and humankind alike. But however, I do sense that there may be a lack of commitment from the mover and the seconder of this motion. And what I say about this, because I'm going to try and drill down. If you go back a small while in time, we had the Chinese lanterns. They all went up in the air, and this council had a debate, and we moved no more Chinese lanterns to be lit on council-owned land, and we would promote it and use public awareness campaigns. Well, after the meeting, nothing happened. It all went dead. And then on July 2019, we had another debate in the council chamber regarding the Yulin Dog Festival, and that was a passionate debate by all members. Sadly, after the debate, there's never been any reporting back, and even today we still promote the very province and the very country that enhances and encourages the Yulin Dog Festival.
Mr. Mayor, we're going off the subject of the debate.
Councillor Routley,
we
please.
need to get, yes, Mr. Mayor, we need to get those signs down. What I want, I support all the previous speakers for all the right reasons that they spoke. Can the mover of the motion report back to this council in 6 months with an update of how successful we have been and how successful the campaign has been to bring sense and sensibility and protection to animal and humankind alike? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Councillor Whitehead, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Whitehead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First off, apologies for the T-shirt. I literally stepped off the motorway. Well, not stepped off the motorway, but rushed home from work to attend the meeting, and I just about made it. Firstly, I do support the motion, and I have noted quite a few salient points. Again, it's very laudable. Ironically, the last speaker, Councillor Routley, I do agree with him. It is laudable, but ultimately, will it happen? Will our voice be heard? Will we make an impact on that? I also greatly agree with Councillor Lacey. She had some hugely valid points around these things being used as weapons. I've seen them fired at not just cars, but people. You know, I was inundated kind of, or we were as councillors over this period, and it is an extended period, where it does resemble a smoky war zone. And that makes me feel like really powerless, because I'm opening messages constantly, and I'm, you know, how can I resolve it? What can I do? Just, you know, lowly Kevo, what can I do? And it is quite sad. I've never also seen so many people writing about having to medicate pets. That jumped out at me. My poor dog. There's people wrapping things around their heads, and they're reaching out on social media for medications. That actually saddened me. I got a dog, little Shih Tzu. She's not bothered, but that's irrelevant. Other people's animals are. And again, Councillor Nuami, I thought he also had a valid point when he said about families, and that there is a balance to be had. And another thing, with the size, it's become competitive with the bonfires themselves. I've noticed this across the estates in Newport. There seems to be this unofficial competition to build the biggest bonfires. And then, like, it seems for 3 to 4 days later, we have this smog across the city, and I just wonder sometimes what the impact of them fires are. So whilst I say I do support the motion, this is not just a straightforward case of a motion. There's lots of questions around it, and who have the powers that be, if we are going to get some sort of sanctions, they do need to get it right and balanced. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead.
Councillor Wilcox is next to indicate, followed by Councillor Dudley, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wilcox, sorry, Baroness Wilcox, I do apologise.
No, call me what you like, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I read the RSPC report bang out of order, and that investigates the distress caused to pets by fireworks. So 62% of dogs, 54% of cats and 55% of horses show signs of distress as a result of the use of fireworks, which means thousands of animals are affected by unplanned and random fireworks each year, including the many animals owned by Councillor Cochrane. Mr. Mayor, I fully support this motion, which urges the Welsh Government to review existing legislation in line with these proposals in order to protect animals across Wales.
Thank you, Baroness Wilcox.
Councillor Dudley next, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Val Dudley, please.
Thank you, Mr.
Councillor Dudley, you're on mute.
Sorry, right, it's just mute now. I think I'm wrong. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, again. I'd like to agree with everybody that has spoken, especially the last three speakers. I have animals, and I have in the past had to have a sedative for one of my dogs, which then, because of the sedative and because of the fireworks, then went on to have a seizure and was no longer able to be with us, unfortunately. So I know the result.
Councillor Dudley, you're on mute.
Thank you. I'm having a little bit of trouble with this mute button. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Dudley.
Councillor Dudley, you've hit the mute button again.
No, I haven't. I'm nowhere near it.
Thank you. We can hear you now. Thank you. Oh. Councillor Dudley, sorry, your mute is on again. Councillor Dudley.
Right.
Councillor Dudley, if you just hit your mute button off. Councillor Dudley, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can now, yes.
Right, now I've got mute coming up on it, unfortunately. I just, to recap, I agree with everything that's been spoken about so far, but it doesn't only entail Guy Fawkes night, it also goes into Christmas and the New Year, and I would like to see that addressed as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Dudley.
And finally, Councillor Whitcott.
Councillor Whitcott, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is turning into something, it's a bit like a seance, this, isn't it? You know, you spend half the meeting trying to find out if there's anybody there. I strongly support the motion and all the points made by councillors Ray Truman and Deb Harvey. I won't repeat the points already made, but I am concerned that at the number of unofficial large firework displays and a health and safety risk, often involving the use of large quantities of quite big explosive fireworks. And there's one, in fact, which has been held recently in my own ward and is often attended by up to 100 people, which is completely unregulated. There was a large bonfire this year which was removed from the area behind the Gare Baptist Church, for example, prior to the 5th of November, presumably by the council, and that was in the lockdown period. So it was not actually sensible to be doing that anyway. but it was then re-established on the 9th of November after the lockdown, and the fireworks were let off at 10 p.m. in the evening. And all you could actually hear was dogs barking in the area, which indicates the distress that there was to animals. And I think actually all the points that have been made by all the speakers, and I completely welcome the consensus here this evening, are excellent points. So in my view, this motion is right, and I strongly welcome and support it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Whitcutt. Are there any more people councillors who wish to speak, please?
No, unless Councillor Dudley has a point of clarification or point of order, Mr. Mayor, she can't speak twice in the debate.
No, I understand that. That's why I didn't ask her.
I also think Councillor Cochrane is sharing his screen.
I've got.
But in the debate, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Truman has a right of reply now.
Yes, I was going to say that. Councillor Truman, you have the right to reply. Would you like to, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, well, thanks for all the comments. It's very interesting, and it is a serious issue for everyone. As we all know, it is a serious issue. But what can I say is that the RSP is also in England, as far as we know, the RSPCA are doing a similar thing to the Conservative government, central government, asking the same thing and asking councils to write. We're being asked to write to the Welsh government because it's devolved, and all the councils in England write to the central government in Westminster. But it's not a killjoy motion from the RSPCA, Mr. Mayor. In fact, two of the things that are quite important to this, I think I must read out. It says to write to the UK government, urging them to introduce legislation to limit the maximum noise level of fireworks to 90 decibels. So it just proves what how noisy they are at the moment, and for those sold to the public for private displays. And to encourage local suppliers of fireworks to stock quieter fireworks for public displays. Now, that's all we can do as a council, and we will do it, is write to the Welsh government, and as all the other councils in England will be thinking about doing. I know they have in Wales, some have already done that. So that decision will be the Welsh government. What can I say is this is becoming a national concern, and I'm sure the Welsh government will do what they can to improve things, because something really needs to be done. As I say, colleagues have spoken tonight. I think we're all pet lovers, all of us. I haven't got a pet at the moment, but we used to have dogs, and but my daughter got cats, like everyone else. Is no different, but they need to be protected, because these fireworks are too loud and they're frightening the life of the pets and people. So, Mr. Mayor, in view of all that, I so move the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Truman. Is there a seconder?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I second this motion.
It's already been seconded, Mr. Mayor.
I know, but
it's putting it to
all this confusion. I'd like to be asked again, but well, I think everybody is of the same mind, and I think therefore the motion is duly carried.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Right, item 6, the pay and reward policy. The leader, this report, please. Leader, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mudd.
Sorry, I just lost it. Hang on. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is the Council's pay and reward policy. The policy for the workforce is an annual report which requires adoption by Council. The policy sets out the internal mechanisms for remunerating Council officers and provides any changes since the last adoption. There are 2 proposed changes to share with colleagues as outlined in the report. Firstly, the removal of the car block allowance for chief officers. Altering the way in which mileage expenses are incurred will bring chief officers in line with the rest of the workforce. who are required to claim for the journeys that they make, as opposed to receiving a fixed payment. Secondly, restricting re-employment to those who take voluntary redundancy or settlement agreements will mean that public funding towards severance packages is applied appropriately, and that due diligence on staffing structures will be thoroughly applied before any decision to agree severance packages is made. In addition to these proposals, Mr. Mayor, this pay and reward policy reports the annual gender pay gap, which is also published on the Council's website. The mean gap has decreased to 3.6% from last year's reported 4.8%. I'm pleased to report that the median gap has now closed, as the analysis of the data shows that the median point of hourly pay is the same for both men and women. Our gender pay gap compares favourably with other councils across Wales and the UK average of 17%. We will continue to review and continually monitor our gender pay gap to find ways of closing the mean pay gap through our objectives published in our annual Gender Pay Gap report, and by undertaking our second equal pay audit in 2021 to identify any further areas for improvement. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mudd. Are there any comments on the proposal? Thank you. The voting in the box is not working. I think, therefore, are we a seconder, sorry?
Yes, second, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Jevons. I think the vote box is not there, so therefore the report is duly approved.
Unless anyone they wish to vote against at this stage, Mr.
Vote against it. No, I don't think so. Therefore, the report is duly approved. Thank you. Thank you, Leader. Thank you. Democratic Services Committee Annual Report. Councillor Ferris, as Chair of the Democratic Services, to present this report, please.
Right. Hello, Mr. Mayor. I don't know if you can see me. I'm just in these postage stamp size picture, I think. I think it's your good self and Valerie sharing the screen at the moment. Still, never mind. The Democratic Services Committee Annual Report. Mr. Mayor, I'm pleased to present the 2019-2020 Democratic Services Committee Annual Report to the Council. The Local Government Wales measure of 2011 requires the committee to report annually to the Council on the work that it has carried out in the past 12 months and its future work programme. This annual report covers the period from November 2019 to November 2020. I resumed the role as chair of the committee in July 2020. The committee was previously chaired by Councillor David Fairweather from May the 19th until July 2020, while I was serving as Deputy Mayor. The committee is a politically balanced group which works together in a non-partisan manner to consider various aspects of the Constitution and other matters that impact on the governance of the Council. The report highlights the important work carried out by the committee last year, despite the disruption caused by the COVID-19 lockdown restrictions. The committee considered options for the appointment of a presiding member, stroke chair of council, and recommended to the council that the current arrangements should continue. We considered the IRP annual reports, and we agreed that the summary of the IRP supplementary report should be circulated to all members for their information to publicise the availability of care allowances. We compiled, we compiled a review of the Officer Scheme of Delegation to include new sustainable drainage powers, and we also completed the review of support for members in their ward work and recommended that the current arrangements for ward meetings should continue. Finally, we completed a significant piece of work in relation to the Boundary Commission review, and it was gratifying to see that the boundary commissioners took on board the comments of the committee when they publicised their final electoral proposals in August 2020 and agreed to retain 3 ward members in Bettis and Beechwood. We were satisfied that adequate resource continues to be made available to fulfil the roles and responsibilities under the measure, although we stressed the importance of recruiting to the vacant Democratic Service Manager and Scrutiny Advisor posts as soon as possible. Mr. Mayor, I move acceptance of the report.
Thank you, Councillor Ferris. Is there a seconder, please?
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mudd. Are there any comments on the proposal? Okay, thank you. Are there any against? No. Therefore, the annual report is duly approved. Thank you, Councillor Ferris. Item 8, Standards Committee Annual Report. Councillor Hourahan, on behalf of the committee, to present the report, please. Councillor Hourahan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hopefully you can see me.
Yes.
I'm pleased to present the 2019-20 Standards Committee Annual Report to Council. This is the 7th annual report covering the period from November 2019 to November 2020 and follows on from the last report presented to the Council in November 2019. The committee has met on 2 occasions during the last 12 months. Unfortunately, the scheduled meetings in April and July had to be cancelled due to the coronavirus lockdown, but our meetings have now resumed remotely. This year has again seen no formal findings or misconduct in the last 12 months. 5 complaints were referred to the Ombudsman about city councillors in 2019-20, but only 1 of them has been accepted for formal investigation. 1 complaint was referred to the Ombudsman about a local community councillor in 2019-20, but the Ombudsman did not consider that the failure to declare a personal interest was sufficiently serious to breach as to warrant formal investigation and sanction. 1 complaint was successfully resolved under the local resolution protocol. This demonstrates that the protocol has been successful in dealing with these low-level complaints locally, without the need for any referral to the Ombudsman or the Standards Committee. We are grateful to the officers and members concerned for their cooperation in resolving these complaints amicably. Finally, the Standards Committee carried out an ethical standards audit of members and senior officers, and although the number of responses was disappointing, the responses received were encouraging in terms of the perception of ethical standards and behaviour within the Council. Mr. Mayor, I move acceptance of the report.
Thank you, Councillor Hourahan. Is there a seconder, please?
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mudd. Are there any comments on the proposal? Therefore, the standards, are there any against? No. Therefore, the Standards Committee Annual Report is duly approved. Thank you. Item 9, questions to the Leader of the Council. We now move to the open questions for the Leader of the Council. Questions will be asked in the ballot list order sent out earlier today. Before we start, does the Leader have any announcements to make?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you
you
very much for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'd like to start this evening, Mr. Mayor, by just with a brief reflection. It's been a year now since members elected me as the Leader of the Council. And what a year it's been. I don't think this time last year when we were holding our council meeting, any of us could have imagined what we'd be going through in the year to come. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank my colleagues and our officers for their continued support. And I'd also like, Mr. Mayor, to thank the other group leaders for their collegiality, their support and constructive debate during this period. Most of all, however, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to thank the people of Newport. It's really important that we acknowledge the role that the people of Newport have played in the past year. It's been a difficult and challenging period of time. We've had experiences that none of us imagined that we would experience in our lifetime. And throughout this, the citizens of Newport have worked with us to try really hard to keep themselves, their loved ones and their communities safe. So I would really like to reiterate my thanks to the people of Newport. We've recently re-emerged from a fire break, Mr. Mayor, and we know the reason for the fire break was to try and reduce the spread of the COVID virus. Clearly, this is something that we all continue to monitor very closely indeed. Again, I'd like to thank the people of Newport for really working hard with us on this. It's difficult for everybody, we understand this, but I cannot stress enough how much we appreciate the support that we've had from the public. And it's been a difficult time, Mr. Mayor, a difficult time for everybody. Our officers have been outstanding, our public protection officers have been outstanding during this period, as have our business support and our revenues officers. Supporting our businesses during these challenging times has been a priority for the council, and I wanted to share with you this evening some of the latest figures. A number of grants have been administered by the council through our business services, rates and childcare scheme teams. Almost 4,000 grants have been awarded to a value of £34.5 million. In addition to that, financial support and information has also been provided to over 5,500 Newport businesses. I'd also like, Mr. Mayor, to put on record my thanks to the Newport Now Business Improvement District for working so closely with us. We're really proud that the business community has such a positive relationship here with us in Newport. Now, as you'll be aware, we're approaching Christmas, and one of the traditions that we have in Newport is the switch on of Christmas lights. A very quiet event this year, very different. An online event, an online launch, which was coordinated by Newport Now, and I was pleased to be able to attend that event. During that event, I was pleased to be able to announce that the City Council will provide free weekend parking in council car parks during December and January to support our local businesses, but also to support the citizens of Newport, because we realise that at this point in time, every penny counts. This support will also be complemented by our Friars Walk and Newport Now's campaigns to encourage people to shop locally. Tomorrow, Mr. Mayor, is White Ribbon Day. Now, you may recall at our previous council meeting, Councillor Whitehead raised a very important question with me. He asked me about the information that was available to people who were experiencing domestic abuse. I'm really pleased to report to the council that that information has been collated, so a huge thank you to Sally and to Mary and their teams for putting all this information together. We will indeed be putting all of this information in one place for the public to access, and I shall be raising it at the next meeting of the Public Service Board next week. Now, as you know, Mr. Mayor, White Ribbon Day is an annual event that marks the United Nations International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. In 2018, 149 women were killed by men in the UK. More than half were killed by a former spouse or partner, and almost all of these were committed by a man known to the victim. Normally, there is a community walk of 1 mile in Gwent to mark White Ribbon Day. However, due to COVID-19, this will not be possible. Instead, it's being replaced by the 149 challenge. What I'd say to all colleagues this evening and any members of the public, if you haven't already, I'd urge you to get involved. Set yourself a challenge focusing on the number 149 and share your achievements online. It could be seconds, minutes, or whatever you like. You could bake 149 cakes, climb 149 stairs, or write a 149-word poem. It's your challenge, you set it. The important part is that you share this message, support others to take a stand against violence against women, and encourage anyone experiencing abuse to speak out, not to suffer in silence, because that help is available. And Mr. Mayor, we are making that even more accessible for victims. In addition to that, Mr. Mayor, on the 1st of December, the world looks to another pandemic, one in which the victims of a terrible illness were not treated so compassionately, one in which the patients were often blamed for their illness and little was initially done to fight the disease. We all remember those terrible TV ads and that terrible public awareness campaign. There was a turning point during that period, a turning point in attitudes, Mr. Mayor, when our Princess of Wales held a patient and showed compassion. These images have been shared the world over. I am, of course, talking about the HIV/AIDS pandemic. Now, as you know, and I'm sure you're aware, our colleague Councillor Chris Evans has long campaigned on this issue. But what I'd like to highlight as we move towards December the 1st is the work of the Terence Higgins Trust. They do incredible work supporting those living with HIV. And one of the founders, Mr. Mayor, of the Terence Higgins Trust, Martin Butler, is a Newportonian. He's a resident here in Newport. As we continue our fight with this pandemic, Mr. Mayor, we really should reflect and think of those who are also fighting other terrible diseases as well. Finally, Mr. Mayor, and this actually aligns to some of our debate and discussion this evening, I'd like to congratulate Newport City Dogs Home for achieving the Gold Award at the 2020 RSPCA Cymru Paw Print Awards for their work with stray dogs. Paw Prints is an annual award scheme that recognises good practice from public bodies in relation to animal welfare. So a huge thank you to all of the team working there and working with these lovely animals. Thank you very much and well done. And that concludes.
Thank you, Councillor Mudd. Thank you. We shall now start the questions to the Leader of the Council, please. Councillor Matthew Evans. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and can I concur regarding Conservative Group fully support the Terence Higgins Trust, and I'm wearing my white ribbon tonight to show that domestic violence in any shape or form against men or indeed women is completely unacceptable in a modern day society. On another topical note, after the Merchant Navy commemoration event, I took a walk into the city centre to look around. Bearing in mind this was the first Saturday after the complete lockdown, I was expecting it to be busy, but sadly it was far from it. Ironically, on my return, I saw a tweet complaining that Spitty was too busy, and somebody I met told me that the Bridge End shopping centre was rammed and they were queuing to get into the car parks and shops. Following on from Monmouthshire's decision, you recently announced the free parking initiative on weekends during December and January, which of course is very welcome. But isn't it time to reintroduce 2 hours free parking to our council-owned car parks? And why did you let council spokesperson defend the earlier political decision rather than you or the cabinet member?
Thank you, Councillor Evans.
Thank
So,
you.
Mr. Mayor, I too walked through the city centre on Saturday following the Merchant Navy Remembrance Service, and I was really pleased with what I saw. There were actually quite a significant number of people there, certainly in the shops that I went in, and I was also pleased to see some shop units that had previously been empty brought back into use. I thought that was very positive indeed. In terms of the free parking, as you know, everything that the council does, and we provide over 800 services to people, everything that we do has a cost associated with it. We cannot support free parking as a permanent fixture. We've already been through the issues around that and the case around that. However, at this difficult and unprecedented time, we can try to do whatever we can to support families, individuals and businesses to get through this. And that is why the decision was made for a limited period only to provide free parking in council-owned car parks on a Saturday and a Sunday in December and January.
Thank you, Councillor Evans.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, the second half of that was about why you didn't take responsibility. While we have a council spokesperson, there seems to be a continuing saga at the moment. You know, the leader of the council is great. She's out there saying, congratulations, we're doing this for fantastic things for the traders. But for the previous news article, when it was about 2 hours free parking, we had a council spokesperson. And we had a similar thing with when we're talking about the bike scheme. We had the cabinet member up there, and when that scheme failed to get off the ground, there's no cabinet member holding up their hands and apologising. You know, I think we need to ensure that we have, when we're having bad news, you need to accept responsibility. I mean, are we saying that officers are running the council, or is it the cabinet running the council? Because you know, everybody has a duty to ensure that, okay, when things aren't going well, you should be there saying the reason we can't introduce 2 hours free parking is we haven't got the money. Now, I disagree with that because I don't think, you know, the cost of not doing it is going to be critical. So I think you need to ensure that as a democratic accountable, you need to ensure that if you've got a message going out there, that yourself or the cabinet members, when we've got bad news, are happy to take that as well as the good news. Do you agree?
I agree that all individuals should take responsibility for their actions. And I'm sure as the leader of the opposition, you would agree with that, Councillor Evans. Every elected member should be responsible and accountable for their actions. Let's be absolutely clear about that. I can't emphasise that strongly enough. Now, in relation to this particular issue, we've debated this many times in this chamber, and the cabinet member, the previous leader, as well, have both stood up and explained quite clearly why it is that the council cannot, as a continuous gesture, provide free car parking. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Thank you. Councillor Kevin Whitehead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I firstly say, great work, leader, Ari, the domestic violence portal and creation of. I think it's a fantastic and very modern thing that you've done, and it is sadly still a huge problem. So I would like to thank you for being a listener, /reactor, /doer. Thank you. My question for you tonight, really, I have alluded to it in the past. It's around the SDR road and the ongoing issues that we seem to have there. I think we all use social media these days for many individual needs. And there seems to be like daily, nightly public reports, if you like, alongside the Argus, Wales Online, etc., regarding crashes, incidents on this, well, I would say infamous road as it is at the moment. And then following on from the tragic loss of Josh Fletcher, his family have since pleaded for a whole review around the safety of the setup there. Obviously looking for the appropriate bodies to review it as a togetherness, which I think it would be a good thing. I mean, even last week, I think there's presently a 19-year-old youngster from Cardiff in a serious condition. So I don't think these moments of point scoring, it's our city, and I think questions like this a lot of the time actually are formulated via public opinion, and I just think we are in a position as councillors, representatives, to bring them up and raise them. So it's that's my question for you tonight, Leader. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First and foremost, Councillor Whitehead, our sympathies go out to the family for this terrible loss. This really is a tragic incident. I'd just like to say that the investigations are ongoing and we continue to work with the police on this. So I just want to provide you with that assurance, and to the public, that these investigations are ongoing. It certainly hasn't gone to the back of anyone's mind or moved away from anyone's attention. But you're absolutely right, Councillor Whitehead. This is not about point scoring. This is about people's lives. And a family out there have lost a loved one. You're absolutely right that this is not something that we should be bandying things about, but we should be actively working to do something about. So at Newport City Council, we've asked Capita to undertake a review. Now, we, of course, because of the nature of this case, we have to wait for the findings of the police and the coroner. But we are currently working with the police to consider the implementation of a temporary speed limit in that area while we're awaiting the findings. Learning from this is really important. Now, clearly, we can't put any dates on that, or we can't make any adjustments until we've got a report from the police. But I can tell you that actions are underway to address this. And you are absolutely right, Councillor Whitehead. We are listening and we are responding. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Right. Thank you, Councillor Kevin Whitehead. Councillor Carmel Townsend, please.
Okay, thank you, Leader. In a recent reply to a question about the number of rough sleepers that were helped during the pandemic, I think you gave a figure of about 180 people. This figure seems a lot higher than we heard in previous time, at a previous council meeting. Would you be able to give some clarification on what the numbers are that are helped or are still sleeping on Newport streets?
Of course, Councillor Townsend, thank you for that question. Mr. Mayor, the numbers of rough sleepers, the numbers of, I should say the number of homeless people. So by far, in terms of homelessness and the number of people who are presenting, this has increased dramatically during the COVID-19 pandemic. And some of the reasons for this, of course, is it's not just about the rough sleepers, those people who were so very visible during this period, who we have stepped in to help. But of course, it's also about those people who, for whatever reason, their relationships have broken down at home, and for whatever reason, they've been forced to leave their family homes, or they've been staying with friends, and that's no longer sustainable. So the number of people who have presented as homeless has increased, and this has presented a challenge to us. When we look at the figure of 180, it's very important to understand that some of these are repeat presentations. So unfortunately, some people who have chaotic lifestyles and maybe have mental health issues or substance abuse issues, they will go into temporary accommodation, and for a whole host of complex reasons that they may choose to leave that temporary accommodation, and they need to come back through the system again. So the number that you see also reflects that. But we have seen a high number of presentations, and we've certainly helped a really high volume of people during this period. But as I said, and just to reassure Councillor Townsend, the figure does not just relate, it's not just about people who are rough sleeping. The figure relates to those people who present as homeless because of relationship breakdown and those issues, and also those repeat homeless presentations.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Townsend. Councillor Yvonne Forsey, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Can I first start by saying congratulations to our leader on her first anniversary? And my question is, please can the leader tell us some more about the launch of the Gwent Sustainable Travel Charter?
Thank you, Councillor Forsey. Thank you for your congratulations. And Mr. Mayor, I'm really pleased to share with colleagues some further information about the Gwent Sustainable Travel Charter. As you know, in Newport, we have our One Newport Public Service Board, and that is the council, other public sector bodies, but also we have a number of members that we invite to that who make a contribution to the city but are not statutory appointees. Now, if you just hold that in mind and the work of the One Newport Public Service Board in mind, that Public Service Board also links into the work of the G10 group. Now, the G10 group is the collective of the 5 local authorities in Gwent, in the former Gwent area, Gwent Police, the fire service, so all of our emergency services, and our regional partnership board is represented there as well. The reason why I'm outlining this to you is because collectively, as a public sector, we actually employ 1 in 3 people in the former Gwent area. So we've got a huge responsibility, but also a significant role to play in terms of our responsibility in relation to sustainable travel. So together, as a group, the G10 group has put together the Sustainable Travel Charter. And what this is a series of 15 commitments that we've committed to, which will enable us to try and ensure that people who work for us or people who are coming to meetings with us actually travel to and from work and to and from those meetings in a sustainable way. So it includes an increase in commitment to active travel and also to cycle schemes. And I know, Councillor Forsey, you are a champion of active travel and a committed cyclist. So I'm sure that you'll welcome this initiative. But it is a really serious issue for us, and it is serious because we know that in the Gwent area, the level of emissions is extremely high. And what we really want to do as a public sector across Gwent is ensure that we reduce our carbon footprint. And by introducing the Sustainable Travel Charter, this is one way, so one part of our journey towards that reduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Forsey.
Time's up, Chair.
Sorry, Chair. Anybody else? The time is up. Please, your questions will be answered by the Chair in writing. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Mudd. Thank you. Item 10. Questions to Cabinet members. There's one question for Cabinet member. Question 1. A question to the Cabinet member, please, of education and skills. Okay, John. Councillor Watkins, sorry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. This is my question to Councillor Gail Giles. Is there a disparity between funding for schools provided to councils across Wales from Welsh Government? If so, how much per pupil does Newport receive as opposed to other cities, e.g. Cardiff, Swansea, Wrexham? How is the calculation formulated? And where does Newport sit on the scale across the whole of Wales? If disparity exists, what are you doing about it, please? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Cabinet member to respond, please. Thank you, Councillor.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I hope you'll give me any extra time I may need, because clearly it's quite a long question of 4 parts, but I'll do my best to be as succinct as possible. So to start with, is there a disparity between funding for schools? All councils' total funding is made up of a share of the total revenue support grant, which is determined by Welsh Government, and council tax, which is determined locally. So each council receives a proportion of the available RSG set out by Welsh Government, based on a complex methodology and many different data sets, such as number of pupils by pupil age, number of free school meals, and the sparsity of the region. As you can see, pupil numbers only form part of the calculation. As no 2 local authorities and no 2 schools are the same, funding will not be the same. Okay, so how is the calculation for the process formulated? The formula-based methodology is driven by a needs-based assessment which is applied consistently across Wales and utilises, for the schools element, additional pupil number data. All councils are treated equally, but use of various data sets point to different measured needs, such as pupil ages, sparsity, number of free school meals. Therefore, the needs between councils differ, and so does funding support. The Welsh Government RSG distribution process is based on measuring a council's need to spend, driven by 52 relevant data sets. That's 52 different data sets across 15 service blocks, with schools being one. These are applied against the funding available and provides the distribution to each council. The process, including the data sets used, are reviewed regularly by Welsh Government and local government officials, and data is updated annually. The funding that is passported into service areas, including schools, is a local decision for council based on their own spending priorities, including specifically the availability of funding coming from their own decisions on council tax. Next one. If so, how much per pupil does Newport receive as opposed to other cities? Each local authority sets a school funding formula which must be based around a prescribed range of factors set by Welsh Government, including funding for energy costs and the number of pupils within a school. This funding is agreed by the local authority's school forum, comprised of head teachers, governors and school business managers. So the next one, if disparity exists, what is this council doing about it? The data used for the funding formula is ambiguous and does not give a clear explanation of how the total school's budget is delegated for specific issues, for example, to pupils with special education needs. If we were to consider the total school's budget given per local authority, you will note that Newport provided approximately £114 million to its 57 schools in 2019-20. Including £4,068 per pupil, but nonetheless was ranked in 21st place across Wales. In comparison, another city local authority, which has 100 schools, provided £163 million. Proportionately, that demonstrates that Newport is providing more to its schools, despite the other city being ranked higher for pupil funding. As previously mentioned, the data is ambiguous. And Cabinet provides an additional £10 million of funding to schools in this financial year. All school pressures were met for 19-20-21, including pay awards, pensions and the cost of new and growing schools. Every councillor is a school governor and knows that individual head teachers and governing bodies are responsible for the management of a school budget. Additional support is being provided to Newport schools in a deficit position. A range of work has been undertaken to ensure that schools are using their finances in the best possible way and maximising teaching and learning. This has included curriculum reviews, benchmark comparisons of sickness levels and staffing, and the impact of the pupil deprivation grant. Over the last year, there's been a number of schools which have improved their forecast in-year financial position due to this support. Cullinan Comprehensive and Newport High School are two good examples. It is important to note that of the 22 local authorities in Wales, only one had no schools in a deficit position at the end of March 20. One local authority had 52 schools in a deficit position. This is quite a contrast to Newport, which is 13 schools in deficit, and we are working with great strides to return to balanced budgets. So despite the severe financial situation as a result of years of austerity measures by the UK government, and we won't mention the billions and billions of pounds wasted on failed test and trace and PPE debacle, think what a difference that could make to funding to Welsh Government and local government councils. But we will continue to provide all possible support to all our amazing schools, teachers, pupils and governing bodies. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Giles. Councillor Watkins, do you have a supplementary question?
I don't have a supplementary question, but I think that the response we've just received has contained some issues that are totally irrelevant to the question I asked. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Watkins. Thank you. Item 11, questions to chairs of committees. We have received no written questions to the subcommittees. Thank you. Before we move to part 2, we need to formally pass a resolution to exclude the press and public on the basis that the report involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 as amended, and the public interest in maintaining confidentiality outweighs the public interest in disclosure. Is there someone prepared to move the exclusion of the press and public?
I move exclusion, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. Is there a seconder, please?
Seconded.
Thank you, Councillor Watkins. Are there any against? Therefore, the motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Before we move on to part 2, Mr. Mayor, I need to declare an interest and remove myself from the meeting.
Hang on, let me read this again. I do apologise.
That's okay.
Can I remind those councillors who are members of the Newport Transport Board that they need to declare an interest at this stage and leave the meeting as they are disqualified from participating in the decision under the Transport Act 1985. I do apologise.
That's no, don't apologise, Mr. Mayor. That's fine. Thank you very much. And I got an interest being a member of the board, so I'll be leaving.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Harvey.
Mr. Mayor, I also got a interest being a member of the board, so I will also leave the meeting.
Thank you, Tracy. Councillor Harvey. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I'm also a member of the board and will have to declare an interest and leave the meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Spencer.
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Clark, I have to declare an interest and leave the meeting.
Okay, Councillor Clark, thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, I have to declare an interest. I have to leave the meeting, but I wish this was.
Thank you, Councillor Rotley.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I was muted. Mr. Mayor, I have to declare an interest in this and also leave the meeting. I wish I.
Okay, Councillor Rotley, thank you very much. Thank you.
Mr. Mr. Mayor, are you happy for me to end the live recording?
Yes, could you end the live recording, please? I thought we had. I do apologise, Anne. Sorry. Would you end it, please?